Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to another episode of BiblioTech on Air. I'm Rosanna.
I'm Ruby.
I'm Israel.
And I'm Romeo.
And today we have a Libros and Libations podcast for y'all. Our recent book was The Killer Across the Table, Unlocking the Secrets of Serial Killers and Predators with the FBI's Original Mindhunter by John E. Douglas and Mark Olshaker, available both on cloudLibrary and Hoopla, which, if you're familiar with a few episodes ago, we did do a review for Mindhunter as well by the same author, so we'll see how this one,
turns out
where it places for us.
So a little bit of a summary for this book, if you have not heard of it. So The Killer Across the Table by John Douglas offers a compelling exploration of criminal profiling through the lens of 4 high-profile cases. As a seasoned FBI profiler, Douglas analyzes the minds of notorious killers, revealing the psychological patterns and motivations behind their heinous acts. The book provides a fascinating and chilling look into the art and science of criminal profiling, offering valuable insights into solving complex criminal investigations. So that's a little bit of the summary of the book.
Just a quick disclaimer. This episode represents the opinions and research of the authors John Douglas and Mark Olshaker. Please be aware there may be some graphic content, so take care while listening.
Alrighty. Well, we can get into those negative reviews now. Let's see what people said.
Yeah, yesterday at book club when we met at Burleson Yard Garden, I was letting them know about some of the reviews that I read. A lot of the reviews are pretty similar. Some of the one-star reviews, like always, it's more about like the delivery process. Amazon, my book was torn or something. But as far as the book itself, a lot of the one-star reviews actually were about the author himself and John Douglas, not Mark Olshaker. So the one that I liked was because I kind of felt it was something that we could discuss. You all have all read Mindhunter, right? I've never read it, so I don't know much about John Douglas. I've never seen the show, so I wanted you guys to touch on it. So this one-star review is from 3 years ago. It's from Arthur. So it says, Douglas hops from case to case in a disorienting manner. The book seems to be more to stroke his own ego, to show how smart he is, than educate his readers on the ways of serial killers. His chapters on Colehep really seem to focus on Douglas's own intellectual prowess, as they are based on the killer's self-evaluation, interrogations, and emails. Douglas never actually spoke to him. After spending 3/4 of the book pointing out how unreliable such sources are, this seems hypocritical and more for showboating. Perhaps Douglas has earned his self-confidence after years of working with the dregs of society. I would like to respect him for that alone, but it's hard to know anything worthwhile about him from this work alone. So what are your thoughts?
Man, I actually completely disagree with this review because I felt Mindhunter was all over the place. And this one was perfectly structured.
Yeah.
It was structured into 3 parts. Douglas used past cases and past serial killers to emphasize what he was trying to say about the serial killer that was for that chapter. So I don't agree with that.
The Mindhunter one, I felt like it was a little bit more about him and like what his personal life and everything. So
Which
I could
makes
see
sense.
that review for that book. But this one I liked a lot better than Mindhunter because it was so easy to follow, and the way it was structured as well, it just went so simply from one high-profile case to the other.
I think it definitely helped having read Mindhunter previously.
Yeah.
Because when he was referencing back to like previous cases like Kemper and stuff, it was like, oh, okay, well, I know about that because I read Mindhunter. But for someone who probably hasn't read, I guess, any of his other works, I can see how that would be confusing. With that said, I'll be honest, like towards that 4th part, it did kind of fall off a little bit for me. But the first 3 parts were very solid. But that 4th part, it just...
Did it feel rushed?
seemed like an afterthought, you
Right?
know, which is terrible to say.
I got that vibe.
But it was just kind of like an afterthought. So
Yeah.
I felt like with Colehep, I mean, we can get into it later, but just briefly, I felt like with Colehep, he kind of, I don't want to say he romanticized him as a serial killer, but I feel like he was almost like fanboying over Colehep. Versus the other 3, he kind of treated them as like, hey, they're just crazy.
Yeah.
But with this one was like, oh, which is the point. He's getting into their mind,
Yeah.
their intellectual prowess, everything, right? But it was just kind of a little weird for me. The last serial killer. But so if you want, we can get into some of these questions. I think they're, we'll get through them. It's quite a bit, so we'll see if we can get through them all. But the first question I had is, obviously you all have all read Mindhunter. You've seen the show on Netflix. I have not. So this was my first book by this author, and I thought it was great. So what was your expectation about the book before you read it? And did the title itself pique your interest?
I was nervous because I didn't really like Mindhunter. So I was like very dreading reading this one. I was like, oh, it's going to be a long book again. and just gotta sit through it and listen to it. But like right off the bat, I highly recommend to listen to the audiobook. I don't even like audiobooks. I like actually physically reading, but the audiobook for this one was just really engaging.
Yeah.
With the way Jonathan Groff was
Jonathan
reading the
Groff.
book.
Yeah, I didn't know it was him reading it till y'all just said it before we started.
Yeah.
So it made sense because it was really good.
Yeah.
So this was my book pick for Libros and Libations. And coming off of Mindhunter, I had the sentiment of it was all over the place. But I was like, you know what? I was really interested in the BTK killer. And so I started reading The Inside of the Mind of BTK, which is also by John Douglas and Mark Olshaker. And then I saw this one. And then I saw that it was narrated by Jonathan Groff. And I was like, oh, hell yeah. This sounds really good. And it was highly engaging. Jonathan Groff, as Ruby said, just, you know, his cadence and his delivery really emphasized the point. It could be, since I had seen the show,
pictured the guy.
Yeah, my mind's already primed as Jonathan Groff, as John Douglas. But
true.
Nah, it was really good. I really liked it. Compared to Mindhunter, I prefer it. Compared to Inside the Mind of the BTK killer, I don't know. That one's about one killer, so it's really, really in depth.
Yeah.
Definitely kind of on the same page. With reading Mindhunter, I wasn't a huge fan of it. So going into this one, I was trying to be like, okay, well, maybe it's better. I mean, Mindhunter came out in like 95. This one came out like in 2019. So there's time for growth in between that. And sure enough, definitely an improvement. Oh, he grew. And so did his list. But yeah, it was definitely a big improvement, in my opinion, for Mindhunter. With that said, I know you just mentioned the BTK one. He was referencing the BTK a lot in this book. And I was hoping that he would kind of have like, that was going to be one of the killers. Because that's kind of one I remember growing up a lot. And so reading more about that, I'm like, oh, okay, well, I guess we're going to get into the BTK killer. Really didn't, but then, you know, you're like, well, he has his own book about it, so it makes
We're just
sense.
going to have
He
to
has his
read
own
that one
book.
next.
But you know what? But yeah, he definitely did a way better job with Killers Across the Table. Well, both of them, because it's two people, so.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. So the next question I had, so right out of the gate, Douglas and Olshaker make it clear that this book is written with the intent of showing readers what the human mind is capable of for the purpose of understanding what causes violent crime and perhaps recognizing the signs to prevent history from repeating itself. So a lot of us had some opinions last night. So what do you think about this? Do you believe this has actually prevented history from repeating itself?
No.
No, the general consensus last night was no.
Yeah.
The world is just too big.
Yeah. It's like, even if you see the signs, people are just going to be like, nah, that's not, he's not a killer.
Benefit of the doubt.
The thing about the signs is that it's bedwetting, fire starting, and then cruelty to animals. Bedwetting is like such a natural thing, right? But I wonder at what age does it become a concerning issue and like as a telltale sign, potentially. Fire starting, that's a big one. And then animal cruelty, that's another big one. Like if one of my children is being cruel to animals, with the information that I have from this book and just the natural information that I have, I'm like, okay, yeah, something's going on. We need to look a little bit into this, see what's going up. To inform the public, I can see that. I can definitely see that. But the world is just so big that I don't know how much it's gonna do.
Yeah.
You know?
And I mean, I think it was Colehep too. They said like they didn't find any record of him, you know, having any of those previous issues, and he still went out to do what he did. So it's not going to be a guarantee. Those might be the commonalities and, you know, some telltale signs, but I don't think it's going to, you know, be a giveaway for everyone.
Well, with this question, it brought up the conversation if it was like nurture or nature type of
There you
thing.
go.
Like
Nature
if people
nurture.
were born to be serial killers, or if there's like something in their like personal life while growing up that turned them out to be serial killers, which there's a lot of different mindsets on that
It's so
in
complex.
itself. Yeah.
Yeah. John Douglas does a great job of explaining that there's pivotal moments in individuals' life that set them in a path, right? So while they may be dysfunctional or while they may be have display deviant behavior, it's not till they're presented with some type of trauma that they go in a different path. Like, so for Ed Kemper,
He was abused and
he was
ridiculed.
ridiculed by his mother to the point where like he killed his grandparents.
Yeah, he was 14 when he did that.
Yeah, and they developed such an animosity and hatred towards their parental or guardian that it just centralizes around that. Their whole being is hating and wanting to repress all those memories and all those feelings. And Ed Kemper, I mean, he killed his mom and then did some stuff with their head. But yeah, there's pivotal moments.
I think the consensus too is everybody pretty much agreed that there's desensitization across, especially in the United States, right? I mean, disclaimer here, of course, but like, you think about school shootings, you hear about them all the time, mass shootings, at any place it can happen. We see it so often and hear about it so much that it's just kind of like,
yeah,
okay.
It's like you're just like shocked for a second and then you just kind of move on.
Yep.
I mean, it definitely affects like those right around, the victim more. Like, for example, Joanne's mom, she, didn't take things lightly. She absolutely went on and fought for that legislation and laws to, kind of help bring awareness and be like, hey, look, like, I don't want this to happen to any more kids.
Yeah.
So I would say in that aspect, like, things like that do make a difference. I mean, as far as like, at least, like in this case, parents, it brought awareness. It definitely changed things there. On a grand scale,
yeah, exactly.
Who's to say?
Yeah.
Exactly.
So what do you guys think about profiling being a relatively new science or method of catching free-roaming predators? And can you imagine how many serial killers are out there today and how many have actually gotten away with their horrible crimes? You can't catch everybody. You said yourself, Israel, the world's just too big. So what do you think? It's relatively new. I mean, it's not like we're not talking about this being 150 years old.
Yeah.
This is a 60s, 70s, 80s type thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so you know what that reminds me of? So back to the BTK killer. He was caught because a floppy disk had like the signature of his church. And so they tied it back to him. And so I always wonder, is it more difficult now
to get away with things?
To get away with things as a serial killer versus back then? Because a lot of it was coincidence. A lot of it was due to technology. And with the advancement of technology that we have now, man, like how smart do these people have to be? And these serial killers are highly intelligent individuals.
They are.
Like imagine Ed Kemper and then Todd Kohlhepp. He was a real estate agent. You have to have some competency for that.
Well, BTK, he lived his whole life like a normal dude to everybody else.
Yeah,
He was
leader
a
of the church.
psychopath,
Yeah.
Church
sadist. You know what I mean?
And another part that what this question triggers for me is that a lot of these killers, especially the first two that he talks about in the book, Joseph McGowan and Joseph Condro, they blamed everybody but themselves.
Yeah, like especially the second killer when he was like,
"We're all born like this."
Those girls got in my car willingly. They gave me the password. It was their fault. They gave me they threw everything at me to kill them.
And then also too, I believe it was Joseph Condro who was given the deal, the plea deal. He's like, "You're not gonna get the electric chair," or maybe it was Todd Kohlhepp. I'm not sure. But one of the killers was given the deal. He's like, there's all these murders. If you don't want to die, get the death penalty, then you got to help us, solve these other ones, right? That he did. And so he did it. And his reply was like, well, I didn't ask for that. They offered it for me. They offered it to me. So, I mean, they're just giving it to me. Like what you were saying, these girls got in my car.
I'd like to think that more serial killers are getting caught in this day and age, obviously, but it's crazy. Like I think Dulce mentioned last night, she was like, all the serial killer has to do is just move like to another state or another country after they did their killing and just keep moving around. That makes it obviously a lot harder to track down. Which
I did bring up the most prolific serial killer that almost nobody's really heard of is Israel Keys, and he did exactly that. He lived in I know, not you, Israel. He lived in Alaska. I think he was military, but he literally would go across the continental United States, and he had what were called kill kits. So he had them like in like 30 or 40 states. And if he happened to be in Ohio, he was like, okay, I have a kill kit buried here. He would dig it up, kill whoever he was going to kill, and then go back to Alaska. So for those states, they thought, oh, it's a one-off. How can you match up a serial killer who has no mapping? You know what I mean? He's just everywhere. But his mistake eventually was he did kidnap and murder a woman from Alaska. And that's where they caught him. He killed himself in prison, so we don't know much about the mind of him, which is crazy. So
Man.
I always advise everybody to look him up. There's a book called American Predator about him. It's an amazing book.
Israel Keys, you said?
Yeah, Israel Keys.
Nice.
That's crazy to think about, because John Douglas mentioned it as well. He was like, typically serial killers go to somewhere that's comfortable for them, you know, like a place that they know or that they've been to, things like that. But now this guy is just like straight up hopping all over the place.
Yeah, I think his IQ was like
it's
way up there too. Super intelligent human being, like to the point where, and then this guy was militarily trained. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, he probably kind of knew all this. He scouted
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
He was not somebody you could easily. He was about 6'2", so kind of a big dude. So not easy to take this guy down. You know what I mean?
In like a case like that, do you think profiling would come in handy? Because if he's like, you know, all over the states and just, you know, locational, how do you profile this guy? How do you narrow it down to like these characteristics? This guy, you know.
Yeah, I don't think you can. I really think in this case, and they mentioned in the book that it's like catching this guy was going to be impossible until he committed that crime in Alaska. He made a mistake. If he hadn't have made that mistake, I mean, nobody knew.
Crazy.
Yeah.
And so he did give an interrogation, long story short, where he told everybody where his kill kits were, and they went and they uncovered them. And the kit was like a 5-gallon drum or 20-gallon drum or whatever, and it had like weapons, it had, you know, rope, it had, I mean, he just had it all in there. Creepy.
It's kind of like Donald Harvey, the Angel of Death, right? With all the people that he killed and then went under the radar, and he was finally caught because they just happened to do a autopsy on, you know, an individual, and they saw cyanide, and they were like, okay, well, this is questionable. And then they looked into like, okay, well, who was, you know, around him when he passed, and they saw that Donald Harvey had just was forced to resign because he was like stealing body parts for like rituals and things like that, and that's because of a mistake, right? And he ended up like confessing. I think John Douglas, in an interview that I saw, he said that he thinks he was like responsible for like 70 plus, you know, something like that, maybe more than that.
Yeah, it was probably more.
Way more.
Doesn't John Douglas mention that he believes that serial killers want to be caught? So like, do you think these mistakes are them like, like a telltale? Finally, they're like, oh, you know, I'm gonna make this mistake, or it was genuinely a mistake?
I think
That's a good question.
I don't think so. I don't think they make these mistakes to be caught. I think they make these mistakes, and I think they say this in the book. I think I regret I couldn't do more. I wanted to do more.
You're right.
You know,
I think it's that narcissism.
Yeah.
Like, you know, and of course when they're like, well, we caught you because of this one mistake. Like, you know, they play it off. They're like, well, you know, I meant to do that. Like, I was tired. I wanted y'all to catch me. But like Israel said, I don't think they wanted to
perhaps
get
they
caught.
fantasize about since they get off on power and notoriety, you know, perhaps they get off on the idea of getting caught.
Exactly.
You know,
the thrill.
They try to like walk the line. Like the BTK killer was sending notes and you know, and taunting them
Because they get real cocky.
Yeah, they get
Well,
really
he
cocky.
did.
Yeah,
very
yeah,
much.
Dennis Rader was crazy.
I can't stand that guy.
So
oh man,
let's move on to the first killer, right? So the first killer mentioned in the book, like you talked about, Israel, is Joseph McGowan. But in the traditional sense, he's not actually a serial killer, okay? His crime was horrible because it was perpetrated against a little girl. So why do you think it was important for the authors to talk about McGowan and his crime? In other words, there are killers who commit crimes like McGowan's every single day. So what makes his crime worth mentioning?
I think because it was premeditated, and Joseph McGowan, for the longest time before John Douglas interviewed him, he was saying it wasn't premeditated. He was saying that it was a spur of the moment thing, that if it wasn't her, it was going to be someone else.
Correct.
You know? But John Douglas, with his interviewing powers, right, he got it out of him. He's like, dude, this, he's like, you said this and you said this.
Yeah.
This was premeditated. And he's like, yeah, it was premeditated.
He admitted it.
Right? And so that's that serial part, that it was planned. He knew what he was going to do. He lied. I think he was caught because like he needed to go get change, but then like they found out that was a lie or in some way
to get him
To
to
get
get
him
to
to
the
go
basement.
downstairs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I think, because it was just premeditated, and it was just very gruesome as well. A 7-year-old,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very
and
gruesome.
then all this good came out of it, right? Jones Law, and how he almost escaped it, or
Yeah,
like that he was like grandfathered in.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
So the other thing we talked about with this question is she was a Girl Scout. So
Yeah,
obviously,
a brownie.
Yeah, because of this case, right? They changed the way Girl Scouts. They don't no door knock anymore. They sell
Yeah.
at businesses. You'll see them with an adult all the time. Like
Yeah.
literally, this one case changed how the Girl Scouts, you know, sell their cookies and kind of promote who they are. It's really crazy to think about.
Yeah, they would just let 7-year-olds run around like
Yeah,
knocking
they're so
on
dumb.
strangers'
Oh my
doors.
God.
to do the selling themselves.
Like in retrospect, it's like, why would they do that? Why would they allow that?
I mean, it was
Like-
just so trusting back then. Yeah, and then the mom too, when she was like, "Oh, maybe she went to a friend's house after.
Yeah,
That's just
yeah.
what she does." She's
Yeah.
like, "Man, that's crazy. How do you just assume something like
Meanwhile,
that?"
one missed call from someone, and we're over here freaking out.
Yeah, for
They
real.
didn't answer
for
the
real.
phone. Where are they? Oh my God, APB now.
Yeah.
Another part that was very impactful for me was when he was always applying for parole, and how he kept applying and how it would come back to haunt like Joan's mother and all the other people, like all the other victims and things like that. That it was just a very challenging time, and they had to like John Douglas like had to be like, no, this is why he is not safe for the public, because James McGowan like tricked in quotations these doctors and things like that, until John Douglas was like, no, it was premeditated, meaning we don't know when he could strike again.
Yeah, because I think they were going to parole him until
Yeah,
he
they were.
presented
Yeah.
it. And then they said no after all.
Yeah,
That's crazy to think about. He could have been out in the streets again.
Okay.
yeah,
And the way Douglas talks to these guys, like he knows, he's like, okay, I got to treat these guys like they're my equal. I got to make sure they have a bit more power. And just him being like, so like, what are you gonna do when you get out? And it's just little things like that when he's like, when instead of if.
Yeah.
yeah.
But this one was kind of tough to read. Definitely, it was like after the first part, had to kind of like stop right there and be like, dang, that was.
Yeah.
'cause, again, it's like everything it was just so terrible.
In terms of the way that John Douglas interviews them, do y'all think any other approach could be taken?
I don't think so. Like the way when he said that people wanted him to be like an FBI guy and
Yeah.
just be like, "Why'd you do this?" And you're so horrible. Like you have to treat these serial killers' egos in order to get them to talk,
Right,
and
cater to
keep
them a
keep
little
on
bit.
talking. You know,
Yeah.
the
You
way
gotta
that they
have
want to
tact.
talk.
Because the approach that he takes is the approach of a therapist, like non-judgmental, open, and genuine to what they think is genuine, right? And so I don't think any other approach could be taken. Like you were saying, you know, you want them to talk, so you have to feed their ego a little bit. And like I like that John Douglas in the book, he's saying this is the approach I have to take, but it's by no means what I'm feeling and thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
like, I had to like bite my tongue, like, you know, I
He
forgot who
even
he was interviewing.
slipped up when
Yeah,
he was like,
yeah,
"But
yeah.
this was a little girl that you did this to," or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was trying to kind of bait him a little bit, I think.
And I mean, isn't profiling like a form of psychology anyway? So
Yeah, definitely. There's definitely a lot of psychology in it.
and there has to be, I think, dealing with, minds like these.
Yeah.
It's like practicing medicine. You're practicing every time. It's
Yeah.
not an exact science
Yeah.
every single time.
Yeah.
So tell us about your thoughts on Joseph Condro and how he infiltrated the lives of close friends when he kidnapped and murdered their daughters. In one murder, he used a secret password, which was unicorn, to kidnap and murder a little girl. And how dumb was the girl's stepfather to openly give anybody their family's secret password?
It's just so crazy.
Again, that
like,
trusting.
yeah, like I mean, I don't want to just believe that the dad was dumb. I'm thinking that that's how much he trusted this
Yeah.
person. You know, I don't know for what reason why he would share that, but this guy was a really close friend to the family. He was the girl's uncle. You know,
Uncle Joe.
yeah.
So, and remember, he did mention, so like we talked about earlier, Condro did mention that he felt it much easier to control people that he knew rather than control strangers who would fight back. So he gained their trust, these young little girls. Hey, I'm your Uncle Joe. I know the password. They were like, oh, it's Uncle Joe. Cool, I'll get in the car. And then
Yeah.
he committed these murders.
That's
you know
just
what I mean?
whack.
Yeah.
Like how
Right.
can
Yeah.
you just sit there like pretending everything's normal? And he even like joined in the searches with
Oh,
the
yeah.
family to look for the girls, knowing
Yeah.
that he killed them. And that was the way that threw the detectives off from him as well. It's
Yeah.
just crazy to think about.
I mean, you should definitely vet people if they're going to be around your family all the time.
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
your immediate family. But again, different times.
Different times. Yeah, definitely.
And we will be back after these messages. Check out our next Libros and Libations book, All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. This book is a beautifully crafted novel set during World War II, telling the intersecting stories of a blind French girl, Marie-Laurie Leblanc, and a young German boy, Werner Fenning. As they navigate the devastating effects of the war, the novel explores themes of resilience, humanity, and the enduring power of connection. Doerr's evocative prose and intricate storytelling weave a poignant tale that captures the essence of survival, love, and the impact of war on individuals caught in its turmoil. Check it out on cloudLibrary today. And now we're back.
So euthanasia and mercy killings always spark heated conversations. Even yesterday we had a pretty good one, right? So what are your thoughts on this overall? And do you think Donald Harvey actually wanted to just put people out of their misery, or was he a sadistic, cold-blooded murderer like the others?
He was definitely a sadistic,
Yeah.
cold-blooded
for
murderer
sure.
like the others. It was about power for him.
Yeah.
It was mercy killings.
Yeah,
no
no.
way.
Which is what he
'Cause-
claimed, of course.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
He did not get any consent.
Exactly.
He just felt like he like kind of playing God in a way. He's like, I don't think you're worthy enough to keep on living or whatever, and then just put them out himself.
You got a paper cut.
Yeah.
Time to die.
You're old. What do you think about the hospitals, though, covering it up? It was obvious. He went from hospital to hospital to hospital. He wasn't even an actual RN. He was more like a CNA.
Yeah.
But this guy took the time to actually educate himself on ways to kill these individuals so that it wouldn't be traced until that time, like you said, Israel, where they actually performed an autopsy. But, the blame should fall on the hospitals as well, don't you think?
Definitely.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean,
They're so worried about lawsuits and
Yeah.
malpractice. It's like, where's, the care for the patients
Correct.
and their families?
Correct.
Y'all
Like-
it boils down to money.
yeah, they had to think something was off too. Didn't someone mention that there was a joke where it's like, oh, someone died with that guy's care? Like,
Yeah.
that's just, it happened. That's a thing that just happens, you know?
Mhm.
That guy just has bad luck or whatever.
Must have been Donald's patient.
Yeah.
Just kind of like,
must have been bad luck.
Dang.
Dang. But yeah, it's just crazy. Like, cause he, I don't know, the way that he killed him too. Like he tried to, like if someone had bad oxygen or whatever, he would just lower
Yeah.
their oxygen intake so that way it didn't look suspicious. But then there was the first kill that he did where that guy just soiled him with a bedpan or something like that, and he
Yeah.
just like killed him in such
Yeah.
a violent and gruesome way.
And then the coat hanger guy, too.
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, yeah.
That
he
was
tried to kill his
brutal.
own lover. He tried to kill like
His
neighbor,
father-in-law.
Oh,
his
yeah.
neighbor.
Yeah.
So like, maybe the argument, again, we don't buy into it, right? But the argument would have had some more merit had it just been at the hospital. But he was killing outside too, or at least
Yeah.
attempting to. So I think
Yeah.
that's pretty obvious that he was just a crazy.
Like, I was mentioning last night, I don't know if y'all are familiar with Dr. Jack Kevorkian. He
Oh, yeah.
was a doctor back in like the 90s and stuff, and he would help people in the US like with assisted suicide.
Correct.
Like if they had some kind of incurable, or if they're in pain or whatever, he would, and for the most part it was like consensual. He did get tried 4 times, and finally like they put him in jail for a few years after the last one. But I was like, that's
that is kind of crazy to
That's
think
a
about.
totem.
He like, is he technically a serial killer? Because I mean, he did a
he
lot of
still killed
killings.
people, but
Yeah.
like from that aspect, I mean, it's still not legal. Like,
Yeah.
they can't sign forms and be. I think now there are a couple states in the U.S., like Oregon or Washington State. Don't quote me on those, where you can do like legal, like assisted suicide, and it's I think much more popular in Europe now. But again, it all boils down to consent. And these patients that, this nurse guy, they were not able to
But
get
are they
consent.
even are they even of sound mind to
Yeah,
get
that's
consent?
kind of what I was
Yeah.
thinking.
Exactly.
Growing up in the
Yeah.
90s, that was a thing. It's not funny now, but when you're younger and stuff, like, the Dr. Kevorkian jokes were always there. I would hear it all the time. And it's like, now you think about it, it's like, that's not funny.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So definitely creeper. Okay. So moving on to the last killer in the book. So Todd Colehep, right? So unlike the other killers mentioned in this book, he seemingly had no real pattern to his killings. He killed his male workers impulsively and held women captive in an isolated location. He also killed 4 people at a motorbike shop in 2003 simply because he thought they were mocking his riding ability.
Yeah.
So was there any method to his madness that you can think of? And just, for some context, they did say, I know we mentioned that maybe there wasn't a whole lot of research, but I'm positive they mentioned that he did suffer an abusive childhood, and he was the only serial killer ever to fill out Douglas's questionnaire. We talked about that. But what do you think about, was there any method to his madness? Was he even mentions that he killed cartel people in like Mexico.
Really?
I don't
man.
know. I don't know how true that is, but what do you think about this guy? This guy was probably the most interesting, I think.
I think this guy was just wildin' because he was also leaving those sus Amazon reviews.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, yeah.
or
it'll work for
it was like a
someone.
chainsaw or something, like a mini
knife,
chainsaw.
a shovel,
He's like, this chainsaw is so much more
sponge.
convenient to chase someone around.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I'm like, how is his account not flagged by Amazon?
Amazon's like, we're making money. It's all
Yeah,
good.
he's like,
Yeah.
This guy's good. He buys.
this guy's
They even mention, or he mentions, when he's being interrogated, I believe, he says that when in one individual case where he had the girl like chained up and stuff, he's like, oh, but like all the sex was consensual.
Yeah.
Like, even though she was
Yeah.
chained up, she asked for it, and then she asked for gifts, so I bought her this, and then
And
I was gonna let her go and
Yeah,
drive her
drugs,
to Tennessee, and just all over the place, not taking
Accountability.
no accountability for his actions, right? And let's just say, and of course this is not putting any blame on the victims at all, but let's just say, even if she said, yeah, it's consensual, like, yeah, I'll do that with you, she was probably doing it because she was like, I need to live.
Yeah, she needs
Survival
to live.
mode.
I'm
Yeah.
surviving.
Survival
Like,
mode.
if I
Yeah.
can trick him into believing that I'm not gonna go and snitch on him, or I'm not, then do what I gotta do.
Yeah,
to
and I think
survive.
John Douglas makes that point.
Mhm.
Like, like this guy's saying it's consensual, but I mean, anybody would say anything to
yeah,
survive.
to survive.
You
Correct.
know?
It's like the whole Buffalo Bill and Silence of the Lambs, which I know one of the which one of these was based off of Buffalo Bill. He talked about it. I don't remember.
I
which.
don't remember who.
Yeah, I
wanna
don't
say it
remember.
was the second one,
Wasn't it a little bit of everybody? Like
Joseph
even
Conjo?
BTK or something?
I
Maybe
don't
Conjo.
remember.
Yes, I think it was
Just Conjo,
Conjo
that was the second
That's the
one.
second one.
because of the way he did things.
Yeah, but no, I do remember hearing
Silent-
hear mention of that.
Yeah.
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 Definitely
But
crazy.
wasn't this one as well? His reasoning for kidnapping her was because she was going to steal from him or something.
He said he heard them having a conversation, the boyfriend and her. So
Yeah.
he killed the boyfriend right away. That they were gonna steal from him, so he killed them. But I mean, there's no real
Yeah.
verification of that. Or he just said that. So-
Yeah.
Because they were like waiting outside while he got quote unquote cleaning supplies.
Correct.
Cleaning supplies.
Because they were gonna clean a
Something,
home,
some
for
kind of
him or
job for him.
something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then
That's crazy.
I don't know how the setup was, but like when he's like describing, yeah, so they said they went out into like, the middle of whatever, just this 2-story random shed or building.
Mhm.
Just like, that sounds kind of sus. Like the way I pictured in my head is just kind of like this building in the middle of nowhere. Like, shouldn't you tell someone like, hey, we're going out here?
Sus, one of the top words of 2023. Just saying.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I
This
saw
whole
that.
book is sus.
this
For
whole, all of
real.
them. So I have a few more questions. Okay, so were you disappointed or relieved that the authors did not cover the typical serial killers like Bundy, Kemper, Gacy, etc.? They did mention them a few times. We've talked about Dennis Rader. They did mention Bundy and all them, but not to the extent of like covering an entire book about them. So what do you think about that? Were you relieved, disappointed? I mean, what did you think about that? For me personally, I thought it was good to hear
Yeah.
about others.
Definitely.
Yeah,
right?
definitely. Because I mean, there's others. There's so many other serial
Yeah.
killers
Yeah,
that we don't
yeah,
even
there is.
hear about either. So it's just really, and then like the different circumstances as well for
Mhm.
each one, really puts into perspective. Makes you think like, would I be this trustworthy? Would I,
Yeah.
be fighting for my daughter in this way too?
Mhm.
I like the variety that he had and the reasons why he chose these 4 specific ones.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
And just like with, like Bundy and Gacy and all of that, they all come off as like just normal, everyday part of the community guys,
Mhm.
teacher, trusted family friend, nurse.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then real estate guy.
Yeah,
Real
Yeah,
estate
I
real
couldn't
guy.
think of the last one.
Yeah.
This guy sold me a house. Yeah, so you know what I mean? It's definitely something else. So
That's funny.
so they kind of segue to the next question. So was the subject matter difficult for you to read? Why or why not?
It wasn't difficult for me to read.
No?
It wasn't.
No.
Why do you think that is though?
I think because my mind was primed already with Mindhunter, the book and the show.
Okay.
I mean, I study psychology too. So my mind's primed already with that. I already naturally have that interest, trying to understand, why people do what they do.
For sure.
But the one that the one that always leaves me very like disturbed is the BTK killer. Like when I was reading that book, I was like, what is this? Like, this guy's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
This is insane. But for the most part, I'm able to like compartmentalize,
Mm-hmm.
just like these serial killers are able to compartmentalize.
Israel's a serial killer.
It's just-
I already have the name.
No.
know?
Israel Keys.
Israel Keys.
Hero Keys too.
Yeah, no, I think the one that was kind of difficult, being a father was definitely the first one. Not that Joseph Condra's wasn't, but like a 6-7-year-old girl.
Yeah.
That one just really, and it was like a hook for the book, right? It set the tone.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah,
like, wow,
definitely.
it was right off the bat. So that one was kind of hard. But I listen to, true crime podcasts like we were talking about
Yeah.
before we started recording. The whole forensic files. We're all sometimes desensitized. We hear it all the time. So I think a lot of us at the book club yesterday were just like, yeah.
Yeah.
We're all
Didn't
pretty
bother me.
desensitized.
Yeah.
I think one thing though is, of course, seeing about it on TV or hearing about it. Another, it just hits different when you're reading it. Like you have time to take it in and kind of picture what's going on in your head. So, that's why I think like definitely that first part. Like,
Yeah.
overall the book, like in terms of reading and following it along, absolutely easy. Very well done,
Yeah.
very well paced. But the severity of the crime for that first one, it was definitely one of those I need a bit of a breather
Yeah.
afterwards.
Yeah. My son is 10, so it hit home for me.
Yeah.
I see him. He's growing, but he's a little guy.
Yeah.
Still
Yeah,
a baby.
it's like they're so trusting of people and have such a different perspective on the world as well. It's like you want to contain that
innocence.
innocence, yeah.
Just wrap them in bubble wrap.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
Like John Travolta.
Yeah,
Boy in the
yeah.
plastic bubble. Okay, so just to lighten the mood a little bit, I have 2 questions after a little fun. Okay, so if you can take about 20 seconds to think about it. But if you could give this book a different title, what would it be? Mind you, it's called The Killer Across the Table, and then it's got a subtitle. But like, was he really across the table?
That was some of the jokes last night.
Yeah,
Table.
table. Should
Somebody
just
said
be
it would
the
just be
interview.
called Table or The Killer.
Yeah.
The
Killers. The
Killers, Mr. Brightside.
I
I made that joke last night.
That's a good song. But I think some people said like in the mind of a serial killer or something like that, having to do with more like the psychology
Yeah.
of it.
Yeah. The thing that comes to my head is kind of corny. Wolves in sheep's clothing. But I'm just trying to see that on a book, and I'm like, that doesn't sound
That
appealing at
doesn't-
all.
maybe the serial killer quiz.
Yeah, right. Are you a serial killer? Read this book.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the title, because there is some research that goes into not only the titles of books but the actual book cover of a book, like the aesthetic of a book, right? Like, is it appealing enough for you to even go toward, right? And we talked about that in the beginning. Did the title pique your interest? The Killer Across the Table. Oh man, that's versus just like the killers, or
Yeah.
in the mind or whatever.
Maybe like unraveling the killer or something.
Maybe
Oh,
something,
yeah.
but I think just with the word killer, people are like,
Yeah.
killer, okay,
Maybe like hidden in plain sight or something.
that's a good one.
That,
Yeah.
oh
That's a good
yeah,
one.
that's a good one.
That's a good
Yeah.
one because they were ingrained in society, like you said.
I hope
so
they reach out to you with
I feel like
royalties.
there's probably already a book with
The
that
royalties.
title.
There might be, but
There
you know
has
what?
to be.
they're
Not
gonna
anymore. Copyrighted.
republish with a new title.
But I
Okay.
will say, like, yes, the title of this book is what like drew me in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was John Douglas. I already knew that. But The Killers Across the Table, I was like, oh, this kind of sounds really interesting.
Okay.
And it was.
All right, so if not this book, which true crime book has been your favorite and why? I think we know Israel's is the BTK
Yeah,
one.
Inside the Mind of
I would
the
never
BTK
would have
killer.
guessed.
I never would have
Never would have guessed.
I don't know. Maybe it was because like I came off of Mindhunter.
Yeah.
And I was
Yeah.
like,
No,
"Oh,
you said
I
you like
didn't-"
jumped right into that.
Yeah, I was
one.
like, I don't really, and also too because I wanted more because in the show Mindhunter, it never finished the BTK killer's story, and I was like, man, I need a more, you know.
Yeah, overall, I think so. The book that I mentioned earlier, American Predator, about Israel Keys, that one was one of the best. And then I've read this book years ago, another one called The Road Out of Hell. This one is very much more difficult to read than this one because it's all about the murder of children. So it's about the murders of they're called the Wineville chicken coop murders. You can look that up. It took place in California in the 1920s. And long story short, it was this like 19-year-old guy who kidnapped his own nephew, held him on that ranch with the chicken coops, forced him to murder young boys that he would kidnap and rape. And it was like so bad that the town changed its name. It doesn't exist anymore.
Wow.
And they hung him. And his last words were, Mom, say a prayer for me or something like that. And they hung him.
Wow.
That book was brutal. I almost threw up a few times, but it was well written though. So like I finished, but it was hard, man.
Yeah,
It was hard
took
to
some
think that
time.
somebody could do that over and over again to children. The movie Changeling
Yeah,
is based off of that book, which is the Angelina Jolie movie.
yeah.
It's based off of that.
Oh, that's cool. I might have to read that.
Yeah,
that sounds interesting.
I think you'd like it, Israel, because of the whole psychology of it all.
Yeah.
Honestly, this guy was psycho. And then the nephew, the crazy part is they were from Canada originally, but this took place in California. The nephew was sent back to his home all traumatized.
Yeah.
This guy still went to go fight for Canada in World War II
Wow.
and won commendations and stuff, and somehow went through life,
With
obviously
resiliency.
traumatized, but
Yeah.
was able to get through life.
That's crazy.
Crazy
Well,
story.
Good for him.
That kind of
Yeah.
goes back to the whole, like, your trajectory. Like,
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's
That's
true.
a
I
good
mean,
point.
because
This-
look at
Mhm.
everything he had to do
Mhm.
just based
Yeah.
off of what you're saying, and he was still able to go live a normal life. I mean,
Mhm.
granted, PTSD and stuff.
Yeah, for
probably,
sure.
But
Double.
like
PTSD.
he
Yeah.
didn't end up how you would think someone like that would end up.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
true.
Definitely give it a read. But overall, I mean, what did you guys think of the book? I mean, if you had to rate it 0 to 5 stars, I mean, what would you give it?
Give it like a 3.5.
3.5?
Yeah.
I'll give it like a 4.5.
4.5?
I'll give it a 4 because the ending, I was like, eh.
I liked the ending. Like, so we didn't even mention it last night either. The voice call, the
Yeah.
phone
Interview?
call, the phone call at the end that Jonathan Groff did
Mhm.
with John Douglas. I know you said you didn't care for it because you felt like Mindhunter already
Mhm,
talked
mhm.
enough about John Douglas.
Yeah.
But I liked that little add in at the end.
Mm-hmm.
It was able to, because he talked about, did you listen to it? No.
I'm going to be completely honest,
No one
and I
listened to
listened
it?
to it in fragments because I was nodding off.
He
Oh,
just
awesome.
asked like because Jonathan Groff plays John Douglas in The Mindhunter,
Mhm.
and he's like, I am able to just hang up my coat and then
Mhm.
that's it. I don't have to be you anymore, and then I can live my normal life.
Mhm.
And he's like, but you have to like live that life and keep all the
that-
research
Yeah,
that you
you're
have to
in
do,
that mindset. Mhm.
all the and like John Douglas mentioned too that his workers, that he would be on the lookout for like signs of like them kind of in their breaking points, and he's
Mhm.
like, I'm gonna take this case from you,
Mhm.
I'm able to catch that because this gets really heavy, this is our life that we have to live with and deal with. And he's like, I try not to let it get into my personal life as well, but he said he just mentioned how hard it was for him.
That's interesting. Yeah, I didn't hear it. I'm not going to lie. Once the book itself finished, I was like, okay, I'm done.
I think I had like maybe like 15-20 minutes left of it. What turned me off was the change in audio quality.
Oh yeah, because of that phone call. I was like, man,
That turned me off. I was
they
like,
could have sat down and intervied like somewhere,
Yeah,
so
I
it
don't
wasn't
know.
this
Just a
shoddy.
staticky, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like an interview from 95.
Yeah.
It's like, bro, what's going on? All right. So with that being said, if you enjoyed this episode, you can find the book, The Killer Across the Table, on both cloudLibrary and Hoopla. We do recommend the audio version. However, if you're a fan, the ebook version is available as well. For our next read, for Libros and Libations, we will be reading All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. Did we agree that
Anthony Doerr.
it's Doerr? Okay.
Yeah, dorm.
We're going to be meeting on January 8th at 6 p.m. at Burleson Yard Garden. And again, you can find this book available on cloudLibrary and Hoopla.
All right. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of BiblioTech On Air, Libros and Libations. Once again, like Romeo said, we'll be meeting January 8th for All the Light We Cannot See. And if you want to participate in that, again, it is open to the public as well as staff. So with that said, I'm Rosanna,
I'm Ruby.
I'm Israel.
And I'm Romeo.
and we'll catch y'all on the next episode.